Welcome to the Real Life Buyer podcast. In this podcast, you will hear interviews with business owners, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, authors, and technical specialists in their field. These professionals will hasten your development, accelerate your career, and broaden your business know-how. Now, introducing your host, Dave Barr, interviewing with a purchasing twist.
Hello, and welcome to the Real Life Buyer. Whether you're a seasoned professional or a business enthusiast, looking to gain valuable insights, I have no doubt this episode will be packed with practical wisdom and inspiring stories. Get ready to be motivated, informed, and empowered to unlock your full potential as we embark on a transformative journey. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to David Braithwaite, Director and Principal Financial Advisor of Citrus Financial Management, based in Kent in England. David is a host of the BBC Radio Kent radio show Talking Money Matters each Wednesday afternoon and is an associate for Strategic Coach. In this episode, we will explore how David uses the power of empathy, strategic concepts, and guided discussions to help individuals reach their personal and professional goals. So, without further ado, I wish to welcome David onto the podcast. Hi, David.
Hello, and a fellow David as well, which is always nice, isn't it?
Snap.
We've got to stick together.
We do our best. We do our best indeed. Thanks very much for coming on the show today. I know you're extremely busy. If we can just start, I was looking through your profiles, as I do with all my guests, just follow what you've been doing, etc. And I noticed a particular quote, and it seems that after you set up your own business, I believe you became kind of discontented. And that was about the direction you were taking. And I believe the words you used were losing your mojo and that you felt you'd created another job for yourself. So can you talk us through the feelings you had at the time, perhaps the changes you've made to release the desired life and the financial freedom so you become more effective and a more successful business owner?
Certainly, yes. And it's quite a difficult story actually as well, really, because I think like many people, I set up in business and I came from sort of a bit of an entrepreneurial background. So my grandfather was quite entrepreneurial and I didn't do the whole go to university because that's what I want to do thing. I knew I wanted to do something for me, but I just didn't know what it was yet. So I went around and tried various jobs and that was the starting point for where I just said, right, I'm going to become a financial planner now. So that was back in 1994. And when you run your own business, I wanted to do it for several reasons. There's four main reasons. There's freedom of time, money, relationship, and also your purpose. So think about the time. I thought, if I'm running my own company, I'll be able to take off whatever time that I want. I haven't got to apply for holiday and see if it's approved. And I can swan around, swan in, swan out as the business needs. Great. Money. I thought, well, I could be in control of what I earn now instead of somebody dictating the salary. Relationships. I didn't want to have just this type of client that I was dealing with. I wanted to go off into different directions and be able to choose and pick maybe who I actually dealt with. And as my purpose, it was all about, right, to create something that my parents were proud of. That was where I was coming from. But what happened was that it frequently started taking over my life. And by that, I meant that I was working in terms of time. Actually, instead of taking off the time I wanted, I was frightened of taking time off. I became beholden to the clients and these so-called smartphones and telephones as they were then. People could ring me in the evening. I'd answer the calls. I'd be there on weekends. I'd be working evenings as well and running around trying to keep everybody happy. And it became a bit like spinning plates. And sooner or later, some start getting broken. So that was the time thing. And the money I found was quite restrictive. And I thought that the more I wanted to earn, the harder I'd have to work. So if I wanted to double my income, well, I've got to see double the clients, surely. And actually, it's not the case. So I found that I was taking on more and more people, and it becomes untenable after a while. And the relationships thing, especially tricky with financial planning, because when you're starting off in any business, a client's a client, isn't it? A customer's a customer, and you will take them on. And there's always this old adage that, particularly with financial services, but it probably does run across other businesses. Your definition of a client is, can you fog a mirror? In other words, are you breathing? We would take on anybody at any expense, no matter how small or how large the client was, and try and be everything to everybody. So I lost that mojo. So the zest that I have when I first set up in business in the first place. And I remember this story when I had this brick of a mobile phone back in the early 90s and walking down the road to actually go and get some stamps to send out some letters to approach prospects. And I started getting the giggles when I was walking down there because I recognized that the phone wouldn't actually ring because at that point, nobody had the number. But I had the enthusiasm. I knew that I was going to make this work. And I wanted to feel like that again, that excitement of when you pick up the phone, it's a new client, dealing with them instead of thinking, oh, I can't cope. So that's why I lost my mojo. So what I did to get around it was to look around at the people around me, to be honest. There are plenty of other people that were doing the same profession as me. And there was sort of a common thread started to develop. So one was that they were a member of a professional body called MDRT. And the second was that a lot of them seemed to be a part of this group called Strategic Coach. And at the time I was like, what's that all about? So I've made it my duty to find out more and looked at the program, wasn't sure. I couldn't always do it because I was too busy. But what you've got to do is when you want to change something in the life, you've got to change yourself. You've got to look at yourself and think, well, what have I got to do to make things different? I need to unravel something. And if I want something different, I can't keep repeating what I've already had. Otherwise, you're going to get what you've already had. So I need to break that. So I joined Strategic Coach, and it was almost as though when you, it's everything they should have taught you about business, but didn't when you're at school. Because a lot of what we find out when running our own businesses can be as luck, it can be poor judgment, it can be good judgment, but you're kind of working out as you go along. And when you start off having your own business and it's just you, and then you start taking on team members and trying to grow it, it becomes more complex. Because it should do. But it was, if no one's ever told you how to recruit the right people or how to actually plan your days, what makes a good client and a customer and what doesn't, then you just keep doing what you're doing. So I had to break that cycle. And that's what I did. So that was where it all started and never looked back. And that was 2009. It also coincided with we were having our son at the time. So I also didn't want to be that sort of person that when I came home from work, my dad would say, who's that strange man in the house? I wanted to be around and be one of those fathers that was there and didn't miss a sports day. And, all those things that are so important because they're not around forever, and they're growing up all at the same rate as we are. But with children, it seems to be far more exponential. So I needed to break that vicious circle and make it different. So I had to make some decisions and that's what I did. So yeah, and life's a lot more fun since then, I can tell you.
Fantastic. It's a really interesting story. And I know I have a partner that's in the financial industry and it's quite tough. You feel obviously you're looking after people's finances. You are a critical asset to those people and they look to you for guidance, which in itself brings lots of pressure. It's a kind of personal business, isn't it? So it's not just an arm's length corporate transaction. It's really helping people with their lives. And
100%.
Yeah, it's a lot of stress.
That's exactly it. And also people, when it comes to money as well, people some people panic or they want an answer for something straight away. And it's very, I suppose I shouldn't be knocking it, but it's a great privilege that they want to come to you. But they've got to realize that there's boundaries and you need to set those boundaries up. But yeah, as you know from your wife, it's not an easy business to be in. But if it was, everyone would do it, So there's trials and tribulations and there's lots of big moments of joy in it all as well. So, and that's why I do it, is that to be privileged enough to get to talk to the people that I do and the team of people that I have. We feel very lucky, so we've earned that right. So we need to make sure we're on it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Now, obviously, we just mentioned a very personal thing. So therefore, the term empathy probably is quite important in your suite of tools. It's something that makes a difference. You can't be too cold when you're talking to people about things that matter to them. So how do you blend in and develop your skills in empathy? Because I understand it is a taught thing. It's not something you're naturally empathetic, as we say. So can you share us an example where empathy played perhaps a crucial role in facilitating a really meaningful conversation and helped your clients to achieve the goals and the outcomes that they were seeking?
Yeah, I think empathy, I was thinking this the other day about the word empathy, and I think it's about being almost politely nosy to a certain extent, is being interested in people, but for real, genuine reasons. So a couple of examples. So when I've been in the room coaching, as my role as the associate coach, there were a couple of business partners in the room, and I could just sense something wasn't right. So rather than just think, oh, that'll be okay, I actually took one of them aside. I said, I could be wrong, but actually, is everything okay? And just shut up and just listen. And it turned out that actually he had fallen out with his business partner. They were in the same room together and it was really awkward. He said, I don't know what to do. I think I need to move on. So I said to him, okay, well, I won't share this with him or with anybody else, but do you want to have a chat in one of the breaks or maybe sit with me and have lunch? It's like, and it was almost, even if I hadn't said anything further, the fact that somebody had listened to him and have taken an interest in him and said, I'll give you some time. Is that okay? And we've kept in touch ever since, actually. And it's all resolved now. But it's being able to spot that when you just think something doesn't feel. And, we always have that thing, your gut feel. And our gut often is quite correct. But even the same with the team that I have back in the office, in the financial services as well, even just walking around the office when you're not in all the time and just being interested in people. How are you? And just let them talk. And it's listening to what people say. But with the clients things, we're very privileged, as I said earlier, that people will want to do business with us. And clients, I find, often tell me things that they've never told anybody else. So I found out, for example, when people are expecting a baby and the family don't even know yet. We found out when people are thinking about splitting up for other halves, and they'll confide in me. And it's about having that knowledge, but what you do with it, and being very private and but making sure that you respect that, and actually saying to people that whatever you tell me doesn't go any further. And people then believe you because they know that you mean it. It's about that empathy side of it. But having that empathy to start with, it is coachable, it is trainable. And what I would say is that for a lot of people, it's about listening. It's about hearing what's going on. And there's the old adage that you've got 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that proportion, yeah? But actually asking good questions as well is really, really important.
It's quite interesting. You're exactly right with the listening, and it's genuine listening as well. It's not the pretense of listening. It's interesting you mentioned the word confidence, because people are sharing things with you, both in their financial and personal world, that they obviously wouldn't want to share necessarily with, Joe next door kind of thing. So some real soul searching type stuff can come out. And of course, if they find a connection with you through the way that you are opening yourself up and listening to them, then they can obviously talk about things that are far more sensitive than they would necessarily do. They've, as you say, they've got that confidence, that kind of doctor-client, solicitor-client privilege kind of association with you. And it all makes a difference. And so you really are connecting with an individual.
Oh, yeah. And I never forget the fact that people will sit down and talk with you. But it's a little bit like I'm in a meeting. Often I'll go and see them at home, for example. But I feel like I often say to them, look, it's like I'm sitting on the sofa with my arm around you. You could talk to me. But also revealing, as you just touched on, is maybe sharing stories about yourself with those people as well, and showing your vulnerability, or saying, well, actually, we've got people in similar situations to you, because they don't want to feel like they're the only ones, or this is really different because it's only me. Therefore, I'm difficult, or I'm in some way awkward. No. And actually sharing stories openly about other sort of situations that are out there will then mean, actually, I'm in the right place because I feel at home here, because this has happened before for other people. So it's about creating that safe space.
Yeah. Now, in your career, you often have the opportunity to talk to larger audiences. Some can be extremely large, well into the thousands, tens of thousands, which I must guess would be quite stressful in itself, shall we say. So you've gone from talking to individuals, you've engaged and connected with them. Now you're in front of a huge audience. I'm really fascinated to understand how you managed to engage with groups of that kind of size to make sure that your message, your discussion, it kind of resonates with them at that personal level as well. So, and I know you've got a sort of radio career, but if we talk about the big audience where you might be in a massive stadium or something, can you reflect on a time when you've had a kind of powerful moment? You've engaged the audience in some way. Question: how did you do that? And secondly, how did you feel that connection was so powerful at that moment? Can you describe a time when this has kind of happened and it really help the audience hear and understand what the implications of those things were and are?
Well, there's 2 examples I've got for you. The first one is I was asked to speak in Sydney, and that was 9,000 people, which is brilliant. And I will say it is good fun, because it feels to me like you're putting on a show. It feels you're on stage, and it's a wonderful experience to actually go through. For some people, it fills them with dread. I really, really quite enjoy it. But I used the one in Sydney. Unfortunately, that some of the background of me, I actually lost my sister to breast cancer, but we had done a load of life insurance for her. So I shared that story on stage in Sydney, and you could hear a pin drop. And my message was that we need to have these awkward conversations about insurance with our family and our friends, because actually it's easier to talk to clients that you don't really know, because rejection, if you kind of like it that way, is an easier pill to swallow from people you don't know, because you're never going to see them again, are you? Maybe. Whereas actually your friends and family are the ones that. So I talked about the experience and what we went through with that, and you could hear a pin drop. and people are listening. It's only a short presentation, but that's one thing, is actually sharing your story, which we said about earlier. But I also talked in Vancouver as well about some of my interesting battles that I've had with mental health over the years. When we're in a regulated environment here in financial services, as everybody is around the world at some level, and I struggled when regulation changed, because it was things that were impacting me that had nothing to do with me. I couldn't change that was changing. The rules have changed. Well, it's not because of the way I've run my business. It's just because the government have changed something. And I really struggled with that. So I was speaking in Vancouver, and I think it was 14,000 people. And I shared my story. I said, look, loads of you are going through regulatory change right now. I know how you feel. I've been there. Here's my story. And I'm here to tell you it's going to be okay. But this is what my journey was. And I shared that journey quite openly. And there was a memorable bit, and I used the fact that when we talked about losing my mojo earlier, the title of my talk was going to be My Balloon Was About to Burst, because I felt that what I was doing was puffing up this balloon, and it's only going to go one of two ways. You're either going to let it go and it'll just go flat and fly around and be dead on the floor, or it's going to burst. And it's about managing that growth of your business in a sustainable way without having that burnout. So I actually blew up a balloon on stage and burst it right in front of the microphone, and you could hear this echo go around the auditorium. But everyone's like, right, I remember. So I've been known since then as Balloon Boy, right? So it's quite funny. But in terms of connecting with the audience, there was a chat when I walked out of that presentation, because you often with these talks, you don't do it for how you feel when you've done it, when you're doing it, or before. You do it for how you feel when you've done it. And that sort of euphoria of that relief of having done something and feeling that you've done a good job helps as well. But this chap came running after me in the auditorium, and he said, David, I've just been waiting for you to come out. He said it was like everybody melted away into the audience, and I was the only person there, and you were only talking to me. He said, what you've just described is exactly where I'm at and what I've been going through. And I can't thank you enough to know that actually it's going to be okay. He subsequently come to find me every year I go to these conferences. He always looks out for me and finds me. And he found me. I was in Nashville in June, and there he is. He comes up and he's waiting around. He says, thank you, David, for your conference presentation that you did in 2016. I'm still here, and I want to find you every year and thank you personally. And that is a real moment. And I think when you're presenting to anybody, any size, it could be one, it could be 14,000, is about connecting with the people in the audience that you have there, talking from the heart. You need to walk the talk as well. You can't talk about something that isn't personal to you. Otherwise, they know. I think they switch off. You got to believe in what you're actually doing and give something of yourself if you want something back. And there was a great story about these starfish that are all being washed up on the beach. I remember hearing this at a conference, and all these 1,000 starfish are being washed up on the beach. And this chap's going along, and he's picking up a starfish and throwing it back in the sea, picking up another one, throwing it back in the sea. And this guy comes up and says, what are you doing? He said, look, there's thousands of them here. You know, you're not making any difference. He said, threw another one in, but I made a difference to that one. And that to me is what it's all about, is just making a difference to somebody that's there that day. You're not going to hit all 14,000 people the same way, but you are going to hit several of them. And it's about going to with that and thinking, what can I give? How can I give of myself? And have I got something valuable that I think somebody else can benefit from? And it isn't about, look at how wonderful I am and look at how successful I am. Not at all. It's not about you. It's about the people there and your lessons and stories that you can share that would help those people in the room, and they can relate to you. And that's all I ever try to do. And I do really enjoy them. And I'm very privileged I get to do these things. And I get asked back because I'm obviously doing hopefully something right as well. It's great.
That must be extremely rewarding when you have somebody that has taken to you in such a way and repeatedly, as you say, come to you and express their gratitude. That's probably a wonderful thing.
And his name's, if he's ever going to listen to this, his name's Manny. Okay. His name's Manny, and he always comes up to find me without doubt. And it's just wonderful. It's really humbling, as you say. It's like, really, that's such a nice thing to do.
Yeah,
because it makes me feel good. But you know, it's just lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. What he must gain from you then is, obviously you shared a vulnerability. You shared a story that resonates. You've made a kind of a connection with him as an individual, because he said everybody else disappeared and he was the only man left in the room, kind of thing. I guess that must be quite incredible an experience for him. Clearly it has been an incredible experience. He must have felt you were extremely honest and genuine throughout the presentation as well. So I think there's quite a few key words there that people need to take on board. You can't be disingenuous and you can't make things up because people will spot it.
Without a doubt. They just feel it. They know, they always know. It's like if you're going to talk to somebody about a product maybe that you're selling, they know if you haven't bought your own product. They just know. Because you can talk it's called talking from the heart. And I think if you believe it and you've gone there and you've been where they are, you can talk from the heart. And that's a lot of where empathy comes from.
Yeah. Now, the benefit of talking in front of a large audience is they can still see you. Perhaps they get more intonation from your voice and that presence. But then you've got your radio career. I think you've even been on TV. So I guess that's a different experience yet again. But you need to, again, connect in some way with the people that are listening or watching the show. And no doubt, a lot of the things you do can be quite complex. You're sharing strategies and ideas and financial things. How do you distill such things into a relatable and perhaps accessible environment for people to really get the benefit of what you're saying?
Oh, it's great fun. And especially with radio, because with television, when I've done that, there's often graphics that they might put up and they can illustrate points and you get graphs or pictures that come up. Radio is the most fun. And I always think it's particularly nice because people are choosing to listen to you. And I always wonder, what are they doing? Is somebody ironing? Are they just parking the car? And I always try and talk on radio as if they're just parking the car on the drive, but they don't want to get out yet because I want to hear the next bit. So I always try and make it as engaging as I possibly can. But you're right, it is some of the stuff is very technical that you've got to try and describe. And it's about trying to paint pictures with words. So I always put myself in their shoes and think, well, how would I think about this? So I had an example actually only last week doing a radio show. And somebody asked a question about how income tax works when you're retired because they're looking to take on a part-time job, but they're worried they're going to get taxed a lot. So I was thinking, well, how can I describe how the tax system here, and this is in the UK, of course, but how the tax system works to prove a point? And I did it by the use of thinking about cardboard boxes with every job or income that you've got put in a cardboard box and a high jump bar. And the funny thing is, when I'm talking about it now, it sounds like, what? But I was trying to say, well, if you're over a certain height, then you're going to pay a certain amount of tax. And when you reach another certain height, you've got another tax. But a high jump bar, everyone can imagine what that looks like. And everyone can imagine a cardboard box. But when you start talking about money, tax, revenue and customs, it's a switch off. But if you start talking about boxes with scribbled labels on as though you're moving home, people can go, oh, I can imagine that. And I always imagine them sort of looking off to the right and going, oh, yeah, I've got that box, I've got that high jump bar. And it is really, really good fun. But often I'll make another analogy I use a lot on the radio is I use what I call their imaginary twin. So I say, okay, so David, you've rung up about a question about X, Y, Z, and you're asking me what's the pros and cons. So I'm going to make your twin. And then what we're going to do is put them all 5 years down the line. And I'm going to talk about what your world looks like. And I'm going to talk about what your identical twin's world looks like. And then you can see. So it's about comparing and contrasting. And people can often imagine a double of themselves. But I'm trying to still engage them in it so they can imagine these two life paths. And if they took route A or route B, where do they end up? So it is really, really good fun. And the best thing from that as well is that the listeners do ring back and say thank you, or we get to hear what happens to them. So I do like a phone in where people are asking me problems about things, what should they do? And I always say, well, look, let me know what happens, because I do genuinely want to know what happens. And they do. They ring back and they say, oh, just to let you know, David, I did this thing that you said, and it's made all the difference, and it's great. And that, to me, is really wholesome, when people do that. Not only they've rung in with the question, but they've bothered to call back and say, I've done it, and you've made a difference. That's all comes back to Starfish story. I've made a difference to that person. But with the radio as well, particularly with personal finance, I think it's the clues in the title, it's personal, it's finance. So a lot of people don't like talking about money. So I always say there's no such thing as a silly question. So please ask me anything that you want. And the chances are, if you think it is silly, it isn't, because somebody else somewhere will go, I'm glad they've asked that question, because I would, but I'm too embarrassed to. So it just gets out in the open. It's the empathy thing again. And it's about leading with empathy, leading the listeners down that route so that they can actually go, this is a safe place. I can ask the questions. And I've been doing the show with that particular presenter now for years. We've never run out of questions. So it is still really engaging. So that's the sort of evidence that it works. But at least people have got somewhere that they can go where they can get that sort of help. But yeah, it's about painting pictures by using words. And sometimes you've got to think outside the box. If it comes to high jumps and cardboard boxes, so be it. or identical twins that don't really exist, but it's just a way of actually putting so that they can visualize something in their head. And I know it's personal finance, but cliche, but I want a penny to drop somewhere. That's it. Someone goes, oh, I get that now. I've never heard it explained like that. And that just might be all that they need to hear to suddenly for it to click and they get it. So yeah, it's wonderful. It's very rewarding. I mean, especially when they ring back.
Yeah, it's really quite interesting. Something I hadn't thought of, as you say, people hear about tax and things like that, and immediately, the shutters go down. It's quite a dry subject, quite challenging to describe. So you must have a very broad imagination to come up with the concept of how to put this in such a way that people can relate it to themselves and visualize it at the same time. So this is where probably your strengths or your empathy with people, you can put yourself in their position to try and make something that you're trying to explain relatable. Would you say that's something that's come naturally to you, or something that you just developed over time and experience?
I think it's over time and experience. And I come back to the fact that I think I am quite nosy. I do like to know things about people, and I like to know not just the facts, but a little bit of soft facts around the edge, that's often called, isn't it? And I'm more interested probably in the soft facts and in people, but above all, their story and how they got to now. So when you're talking about people, I often say, well, so how long have you lived? Why did you buy this property? Or what made you set this business up? And then you just get these stories comes out, and there's certain cues that strategic coach can help you with as well, that get you to ask the right type of question, which is quite interesting as to where that questioning goes. And it's giving them the space to answer it as well. And just listen. People are great. Everywhere's people great. And I was talking to my son the other day. We were on holiday down in Devon, and we go into shops and places that you go. I'll always talk to the people behind the till. I'll always talk to the person behind the bar. I'll always say hello to the waitress, whatever it is, because you never know where these stories lead just by saying hello and just being a nice person. It isn't hard, but a lot of people really struggle with that, or they're shy. But you'd be surprised how many people will talk to you and just smile. It's not difficult, but it is for some people. But the stories and the people that you get to then talk to that you wouldn't have otherwise done, is the world's your oyster. It really is, David.
Some of the key things I'm picking up here is the engagement. You put yourself out to engage with people that perhaps other people wouldn't necessarily consider. So again, I hear again the empathy coming here. You're sharing things that perhaps, as I say, other people will be a little bit more distant about. What I'm quite interested in hearing is, I'm sure you've got lots and lots of stories of where you've helped people. You mentioned that one of the key skill sets perhaps you have is to ask the right questions. So can you give us an example where you've helped a particular individual over a particular challenge using your competence and knowledge of empathy and questioning in such a way that you've helped to draw out of them what they needed to, and that's ended up with you supporting them in a great success going forwards? Have you got anything you can share with us today on that?
I have, yeah. So let me share with you, this is a strategic coach tool, but it's called the Dan Sullivan question, or the DOS question, if people want to look it up. And what it is a question designed to get the people to open up to you, to share with you. So the question that you ask is, hey, Mr. Client, if we were meeting 3 years from today, looking back over those 3 years, what has to have happened for you, both personally and professionally, to be happy with your progress with me? And then you just keep quiet. So I asked that question of a client some years ago that inherited some money, as it was. And I said, 3 years now, we're going to... And actually, what they wanted this money to do was to educate their children. And they said, oh, it would be perfect if we could have enough to get the education done correctly, and we could pay for them to go to the school we want them to go to. And this will mean... I said, well, so what does that mean? Well, it means that they'll be... And they open up. But a lot of people would go in there saying, oh, it's an investment I've got to do, which is right. But people don't want the investment. They want what the investment does. So if you don't ask the right question, how are you going to know what it is you got to do? So then what you can do, when I did with these people with the school fees planning, was to have to then say to them, well, look, actually, with the amount that you've got, it's not really going to hit what you want it to do, being truthful, unless you take this higher level of risk that if you're happy to take it. They took it. And then every year we've met up since over the years, and I've always refocused them back. I said, right, I'm just going to take you back. What you wanted to do with money was, and you can recount back. So A, it shows you've listened, and B, it shows you've taken into account with what they're doing in the planning in the first place. But see, you've turned back up. And that's another thing. It's the last thing is actually you're still there doing the work. But to refocus them and say, right, so it was for the school fees planning. That's what we're looking to do. And this is how we're doing with that progress. And it's not about the investment. It's just about, well, how am I doing with the school fees planning? And I often joke the same thing with, the pension. No one wants a pension. They want what the pension does. No one wants a business, really. They don't want a job. They want a company that they can look back and actually can maybe run itself when they're not there. They don't want to be beholden to it. So actually what people say that they want isn't what they really want, but it's about asking the right question to find out what the real driver is. And that question where you talk about 3 years hence from now, they have to see themselves with you for 3 years' time for a start. And if they can't answer the question, you might as well pack your bags and go because they're not seeing you in the future with them. So it's a really good filter question. But also you can ask that question with lots of people and you'd be so surprised what comes out. And you just zip it. You just keep quiet and let them do their thing. And they will just open up and open up and open up and open up because they're seeing a future with you and they're happy to share that future with you. But it's asking the good question to start with, but also looking at what their dangers are, their opportunities and strengths. So it's the DOS question as well. So what are the dangers that are going to stop you getting there? What opportunities can we maximize? And what strengths have you got to play on? So it's all about them. So when you're recounting this back, it's about them. It's their show, not your show. But you're just the person that's going to conductor of the orchestra to get them there, but you're there as what I would often call myself is I'm your critical friend. I'm your friend, but I'll tell you what the truth is, but I will help you get there. But if you don't know where they're heading, people just putting money into something or just wanting this isn't really what they want. There's always a reason why they want it. And it's about asking the right question to get to that answer.
It's interesting. I'm thinking now, I'm sure there must be some people who struggle, should we say, with your suggestions, your recommendations, who have a very fixed view of what they believe is the right thing to do. And really, they're coming to you for reassurance that is the right thing, perhaps. They possibly could become intransigent. I'm interested to see how you deal with those sort of people when they really don't want to follow your advice, or they're not listening to what you're saying, or there's an obstacle in the way. So I'd love to understand what kind of strategies or techniques you use that you find are particularly effective with those sort of individuals, so you could get past that obstacle and achieve the success that is possible. So how do you overcome those people?
It is difficult, especially when it's their idea, when they've come to you, and sometimes a client might come to me saying, I've read about this and I want to do that. And I actually had somebody today who came to me and he said, I need a pension. Right. Well, I actually had the meeting with this chap. It turns out he's unfortunately got an operation next week for cancer. And his real thing is, I'm worried about what might happen to me if my family, if I'm not here anymore. And I think we need to actually, so it's come round that actually we should be looking at insurance for him when we can and his wife. So he came to me with one issue, but in just talking and listening to him, and it's all very well to go in there. I often say to people that we're not order takers. We're not a waiter, So when people say they want this, our job is a good way to say, well, actually, you might want to have this with that. And actually, have you thought about this? So it's about pointing out in a polite way and about having those really good questions to draw out other things. And so from my point of view, yes, we could just stick down there and go, okay, but our job as well as that critical friend, I come back to that, is to say, okay, look, I'm going to have a bit of an awkward conversation with you now, and you can either take this or leave it. But my job is to tell you what I think the truth is. And you have come to me because I'm a professional. So I'm going to tell you, if you do that, here are the dangers. If you're happy with that, but what I'll do, I'll check in with you in 6 months' time and see how you're getting on. How about that? Then it deflates the situation. You're not saying that, oh, no, you're wrong, but it's just trying to put your point of view across and say, well, look, have you thought about this? And this is what my worry is if you were to do that. So it's about being empathetic again, but listening and having that awkward conversation. Otherwise, you're just like everybody else. Our job is to do the right thing, whether they know it is for them or not. But our job is also to have that conversation when it's difficult. Having the difficult conversations is just important having the easy ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting how you draw people out somewhat. You find a way to circumvent perhaps their fears, or reassure them in some ways. And the fact that you've said, I'm still here, I'm going to come back to you in X number of months, means you're not just giving them some advice and walking away. You're suggesting this is a relationship where you're going to keep engaging with them. And I think that's quite important as well.
And you do go back, but the main thing, you've got to fulfill your promise. You've got to ring them again in 6 months and turn back up and say, hey, look, I just want to check in with you. When we spoke last, you said you're going to do this. I suggested this. Just want to see how it's going. And they go, actually, this guy does care. Because often when people get something in their own mind about what they believe is the right thing, it's really hard to get them to change that mind, because they've already bought it, in their own head. So you're almost calling them silly if you tell them that they're doing the wrong thing. It's like, it's a really delicate battle to actually have. But at the same time, as I come back to the point, is that I'm there as a professional. I have to have those difficult conversations. And I will say that to a client. I said, look, my job is this and I need to do this. But yeah, you're right. It's just, don't just take it lying down. If you believe it, stick by it, So.
Absolutely. After all, you are the expert in this case. Now, before I ask my final question, just keeping an eye on the time, I'm sure people are quite fascinated about you and what you do in your company. Where's the best place to check out yourself, be it websites or social media?
So if they want to go on, I have my own landing page, actually. So they're interested in finding more about Strategic Coach. If they just go to davidbpodcast.com, that's davidbpodcast.com. There's a load of resources that I put in there that people can have a look. There's a free book they can read. There's a tool they can actually try. So they want to find out a little bit more, they could do that. And there's strategiccoach.com. If people want to actually get in touch with me, citrusfinancial.co.uk is my business, my main business that I've got. Or the social media, if you just put in David Braithwaite, you'll see me on, is it X now, I think, isn't it? Twitter. I'm Citrus David on there. People can find me. They just Google my name. I do crop up quite a lot, which is either a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not sure. But yes, it does have its purposes.
Absolutely. Now, just where we talked about in the last question about things happen, we talked about a very unfortunate gentleman who's got a cancer situation, an operation or something coming up. And that means that we are constantly facing change, challenges, new demands. And you've got the added complexity that an outside body called our government also makes changes for you, and the things you may have suggested previously no longer perhaps are quite right or need to be adjusted. So you're constantly facing with turmoil and change. So how do you stay on track? How do you help individuals maintain their focus, help them prioritize their goals, the things they should be doing when you're dealing with so much complexity and change all the time?
About focusing on those goals. And a lot of people don't even write them down or know what they are in the first place, but it's begin with the end in mind. So often when you're faced with something that is difficult, you think, so why am I doing this? Oh, it's because it could be it doesn't have to be the house, the car. It could be, I want to only work a 3-day week or something. Whatever the goal is, this is why I'm doing it. And it's an old adage, but sometimes count to 10 as well really does help. And I'm a big fan of sleeping on it, strangely enough. And we all get lots of stress in our work. And the people that run the office with me know full well I do this quite a lot. They'll say, oh, we've got this challenge going on. We've got to sort this out. So, right, okay, I'm going to take that on board. I'm going to sleep on it. Can we come back to it tomorrow? And I do. And you just sort of ask the question in your head about what you want to solve. And it's amazing what your brain can do overnight rather than panic solve something. And actually, when you go back to it, the answer every single time is different to what it would have been had we've gone bun in a china shop and tried to sort it out at that particular point. Now, we might have got it right. We might have got it wrong. But I'd rather have had that time away and take the heat out in the moment and then go, right, actually, let's regroup on this. And here's some thoughts that I've had. And also about strategizing. And I'll come back to Strategic Coach again. They give you tools with which you could do some thinking on. So often, actually, and it's a bit old fashioned, some about writing stuff down and thinking about some of the issues that you have, but also creating that time for you to think about them as well. So that it's very well, sometimes we're very busy being busy. Sometimes we've got to stop being busy. And it comes back to where I started up a business in the first place. I had a business plan. I took that time out and I created the plan. But how often do we actually do that in our business from day to day? Or are we just on the treadmill that seems to be getting faster? And for a lot of people, they can resonate with that. And sometimes you've got to slow down to go faster. So make sure you do that as well. And what's the first thing? If you ring IT about a problem about something, they always say, have you ever tried switching it on and off again? Same thing with us. Sometimes we got to unplug sometimes to actually get better at what we do. So that's why a lot of time I'll say, where's the goal? Where's the focus? Let's sleep on it and we'll come back to it when we're all a bit calmer and we'll be absolutely fine. But another big thing for me is keeping the right company. Who are you hanging around with most of the time? And there's a whole thing of balcony or basement people. Are you with the people that can raise your game, or are you with the pity party that will help bring you down to their level? And it's about making sure you've got your tribe, I think people call it, but have that group of people. And there's another saying that you become the average of the top 5 people that you hang around with. We've probably all heard that before. So who are the 5 that you hang around with? And actually check those. And some of them might be family, but some of them might not be family. There might be the wrong type of family that are bringing you down. So just choose your company, stay focused, have a goal, know where you're actually heading, and make sure that you're in the right company that's going to motivate you and inspire you to get there. But if you are in a bit of a funk, just stop, pause, look around for a bit, and it will be fine.
Some brilliant advice there. I absolutely agree that reflection time, I find myself, really important. I only had a particular challenge yesterday. As you say, went and slept on it. Seems to be my sweet spot for answers at about 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning, unfortunately. So I always keep a piece of paper and pen by the side of my bed as well. So as you say, definitely your mind has an ability, doesn't it, to break things down and reason somehow when it hasn't got all these other distractions going on. So I think it's excellent advice there. Well, it's been fascinating talking with you today. I think you have shared, as I anticipated, an awful lot of great information, great things for people to consider and reflect on. So thank you very much for joining us today, David.
Thank you very much for having me. And I have thoroughly enjoyed our chat. And it just feels like it has just been a chat, which is fantastic. So thank you.
Great. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it and it's given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. If you are a purchasing or a supply chain professional, business owner or director, come and join my Facebook group, the Purchasing and Supply Chain Community Hub, a safe place to engage with like-minded, friendly people. See you soon. Bye.